All right, let's just dive right into this explainer. Today, we're tackling the ultimate business survival question using cost-volume profit analysis. If you've ever wondered how management predicts that exact moment a venture goes from bleeding money to finally turning a profit, well, you're absolutely in the right place.
So how many units do you actually need to sell just to survive? It sounds like a simple question, right? But honestly, it's the absolute foundation of all business strategy. Before a business can thrive, you have to know exactly where the waterline is. That's that magic moment you stop losing money and start making it. Until you have that number, everything else is just guesswork.
Here's our roadmap for today. First, the profit puzzle. Second, finding the break-even point. Third, toy rockets and target profits. Fourth, your margin of safety. And finally, number 5, the reality check. Let's get started. Number 1, the profit puzzle. We're going to start with the foundation here, which is understanding the profit structure of an enterprise.
Cost-volume profit, or CVP analysis, is basically your roadmap. It predicts exactly how changes in your costs or your production volume are going to impact your bottom line. It's a totally indispensable tool for budgeting, making pricing decisions, and figuring out if you should expand production. It essentially solves the puzzle of how much work you actually need to do just to hit the profit you want.
Number 2, finding the break-even point. This is where things get interesting, because it establishes the absolute minimum baseline for business viability.
To actually do this math, you've got to split your expenses first. You can't just look at a giant lump sum of money going out the door and call it a day. We have fixed costs, which stay totally constant regardless of volume. Think about your rent or admin overhead. And on the flip side, we have variable costs. These change directly with every single unit you produce, like direct materials and wages. Grasping this division, it's literally the key to unlocking the rest of the analysis.
So, that brings us to the crucial metric, the break-even point. Think of this as your waterline. At this precise level of production, your total cost perfectly equals your total revenue. Once you hit this magic number, you stop paying fixed costs out of your sales, and the only costs you incur going forward are just those variable costs.
Now, to actually reach that break-even point, we look at something called the unit contribution margin. This is such a brilliant little metric. It tells us exactly how much money from each sale goes directly toward paying down those fixed costs. You just take your selling price and subtract your variable expenses. Every dollar, or naira, left over is your contribution to keeping the lights on. And here's the best part. Once the lights are fully paid for, that contribution turns directly into pure profit.
All right, moving on to number 3, toy rockets and target profits. Let's see how this builds into an actual, real-world business scenario.
Imagine a guy named Aljai Ghazali selling toy rockets at the Kano International Trade Fair. Here's his setup. He pays a 2,000 naira fixed rent in advance, he buys these rockets for 5 naira each, and then he turns around and sells them to the public for 9 naira. It's a perfectly clean, simple scenario to test out our formulas.
Using that contribution margin technique we just talked about, let's break this down. First up, we subtract his 5 naira variable cost from his 9 naira selling price. That leaves us with a 4 naira contribution per rocket. Next, we just apply our break-even formula by taking his 2,000 naira fixed rent and dividing it by that 4 naira contribution.
And that math gives us exactly 500 units, meaning Alhaji has to sell 500 toy rockets just to survive the trade fair with zero profit. If he sells 499, the whole venture was a loss. But if he sells 501, he's finally in the green. So 500 is his ultimate survival metric.
But hey, what if Alhaji doesn't just want to break even? What if he wants a specific target profit, say a 20% operating margin? Because let's be real, nobody goes into business just to break even, right? Well, CVP analysis actually lets us build that desired profit right into the exact same formula.
By plugging that 20% target into the CVP equation, the math reveals he needs to sell approximately 910 units to hit his financial goal. We've taken the very same fixed and variable costs, tossed in his target profit, and boom, now he has a concrete sales target to aim for to achieve actual business success.
Number 4, your margin of safety. Now that we've got our break-even target, we need to talk about building your business's life raft.
Because things rarely go exactly to plan, right? The margin of safety measures the breathing room between the sales you expect to make and the sales you need to make just to break even. It's your buffer zone. Basically, the larger your margin of safety, the more revenue you can afford to lose before you actually start hurting the business.
To put that into perspective, let's say your budgeted sales are 21,600 naira, but your break-even point is 18,000. That 3,600 naira gap, That's your safety buffer. It means your sales can literally fall short of your budget by 3,600 Naira and you're still going to walk away without losing a dime. It's the ultimate indicator of your operational risk.
Finally, number 5, the reality check. We really have to conclude by bringing all these textbook formulas back down to reality.
Because while CVP analysis is incredibly powerful, the math relies on some, well, pretty highly unrealistic assumptions. It assumes your fixed costs never jump, your variable costs never get discounted, there are zero inventory changes, and that you somehow have perfect market knowledge. Now, in a textbook, sure, this works perfectly.
But out in the real world, costs step up. You might suddenly need to rent a bigger warehouse. Discounts alter margins, like buying in bulk completely changes your variable cost per unit. And economic risk, it's just always there. You really have to interpret your break-even calculations in light of these limitations. You have to know that in practice, a changing sales mix or a sudden drop in productivity is going to shift your waterline unexpectedly. It's an absolutely vital tool for finding your baseline for sure, but it leaves us with a pretty big question. Do you truly know where your business's waterline is right now? Or is it time to run the numbers again? Understand your contribution margin, rely on the math, but always be ready to adapt to the messy reality of the market.